One thing that keeps coming up in all the classes over the years is there's inevitably some kind of conversation about being a new manager and making that transition from coworker to now you're in charge of everybody. So I think that's really hard. As a manager, when you start, say you're hired from outside the office, you come in, you don't know these people, you don't have history, you don't necessarily have preconceived notions about them because you've known them for years and you know how crazy they can get when they're fighting with their boyfriend or when their kids are having trouble in school. None of that baggage comes with you. So as a new manager, you're able to really talk about the abilities in the office and you're not really distracted with all the personal stuff. But when you are an employee of the office and then you suddenly are in charge of the office, that's a whole different ballgame. And so I wanted to just go over a couple ground rules for that. If you find yourself in that situation where, you used to hang out and happy hour and all that kind of stuff, and now things are a little bit strange and you love being a manager, but you also know that it used to be more fun. So this is where we're going to have a really honest conversation about what it means to be a manager versus a coworker. Hi, welcome to another edition of Nobody Told Me That. It's another solo edition. I was going to have some amazing guests last couple days, but I got sick, they got sick, and I guess the crud is going around or whatever you want to call it. And so I thought, you know what? Instead of having you all wait until I can get more guests on, I wanted to go over something that came up in some recent management classes that I was teaching. So at the ADA SmileCon in New Orleans, we had two different classes there. I repeated them, but very busy there, right? So I spoke, of course, on insurance, but I also gave another class, which is one of my favorite classes to give. And it's actually called Nobody Told Me That, Management Issues We Should Talk About. And in that class, it's a lot of things that we cover, not only on the podcast, but not your regular, like, how do you handle an upset employee or how do you, come up with an inventory system. It's really about issues that don't come up often, but when they do, they tend to be like huge, hairy issues that we have to worry about. And so I wanted to bring all that knowledge to them. We talked about, what to do if there's violence in the office, what to do when you're interviewing someone and one of your team members asks the wrong questions. I mean, there were a couple different things there. It was kind of all over the map. And then what also happens is when there's something that's topical that comes up. Like I remember we used to talk about when marijuana was becoming legal in pretty much most of the states, right? So we ended up talking about that a lot in classes because in some states it was just becoming legal. In other states it had been legal for a while. So it was really interesting to hear that point of view. But one thing that keeps coming up in all the classes over the years is there's inevitably some kind of conversation about being a new manager and making that transition from coworker to now you're in charge of everybody. So I think that's really hard. As a manager, when you start, say you're hired from outside the office, you come in, you don't know these people, you don't have history, you don't necessarily have preconceived notions about them because you've known them for years and you know how crazy they can get when they're fighting with their boyfriend or when their kids are having trouble in school. None of that baggage comes with you. So as a new manager, you're able to really talk about the abilities in the office and you're not really distracted with all the personal stuff. But when you are an employee of the office and then you suddenly are in charge of the office, that's a whole different ballgame. And so I wanted to just go over a couple ground rules for that. If you find yourself in that situation where, you used to hang out and happy hour and all that kind of stuff, and now things are a little bit strange and you love being a manager, but you also know that it used to be more fun. So this is where we're going to have a really honest conversation about what it means to be a manager versus a coworker. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you get the promotion, the purpose of the rest of this podcast, you're being promoted from within. When you receive this promotion or title, things have to feel different. And I think that's the biggest issue when somebody becomes promoted from within, because there's really no change. Like, you sit in the same place, your workspace looks the same, your title may not even change. Maybe you were the manager and now like you have more managerial duties, but you're still the manager. So if things haven't changed, it's hard for you to feel like things have changed. I mean, it's almost impossible for the team to feel like things have changed as well, because now they just really, what's changed for them is they know that you have more duties, but they also know that you're probably getting paid more money. So there's always that little, that little burr that gets in there. And let's be honest, we have to admit it. If you are the manager, you probably are going to be making more money than the colleagues. And you will likely be working with people who are very, very good at their jobs, their respective jobs, and wonder, why does she get paid this and why don't I get paid this? And it's human nature. Like, right. Like, I would be surprised if you didn't have at least one instance of that in your lifetime as a manager. I think that's human nature. People in all positions, I worked with corporate, I worked with small offices, in all positions, everyone usually feels like they could do the job of someone else better than what they're doing. Okay. So, and you probably felt that way too. I mean, some of us took over for people that we definitely felt that way about, right? So your mindset has to shift, but also your appearance as the manager has to shift. And I think that's the biggest problem that I see, is that we don't make that change. Let me give you an equivalent. Say the person comes in, we perform scaling and root planing on them, right? You know that they are a perio patient. So when they come back, they're supposed to have a periodontal maintenance procedure. It's not a cleaning anymore. It's not just your regular prophylaxis. It's a different procedure. It has to feel like a different procedure. The hygienist is doing different measurements and doing different gum care therapy and preventive conversations. It has to feel different. If it doesn't feel different, then the patient rightly is going to come up and say, why am I getting charged more? It feels the same. It's the same old, same old. Most office managers have had this conversation if your hygienist is not providing that extra value, right? So think of it that way. Your employees see you doing the same thing. They see you texting a lot. They see you maybe coming in late. They see you doing all of the things you used to do. I'm not saying you're a bad manager. This was just what you did, right? Like, you had different habits and so do they. Maybe they come in late. Maybe they, leave at certain times. Everybody is doing everything the same, is my point. Why then is everything different as far as the power dynamics? Okay, so I want you to shift not only your mindset, but actually the physical appearance, right? So maybe you do move your desk. Maybe you still sit up front, but you have dedicated duties and tasks that you move and do in a different area. Maybe you go into the doctor's office to discuss certain things. So do you see what I mean? Like, things have to be different, because ideally you are doing more high level strategic thinking and managing a lot of tasks. The other thing is, and this is hard, you're going to have to set some boundaries, and that's tough, especially when you have worked with these people for a long time. I mean, heck, even if you haven't worked with them for a long time, you got friendly. We work with people, we're there all day with them. We see them a lot more than our families in many cases. And so boundaries start to get blurred. We have a good time. We laugh. We give each other, we razz each other. We tease each other, all of that kind of stuff. Maybe you overshared about something down the, somewhere in the past. Those boundaries now that were fuzzy now cannot be fuzzy. As a manager, actually, I'm going to hold you to a higher standard. I'm not saying that they're at a different level. That's very different. That mindset is going to get you in trouble every time. But even though you are performing the same patient duties and you're moving the office to the same goal, your level of performance and your level of strategic thinking is higher than expected for the rest of the team. And that's okay. You are the leader of the team, right? You and your doctor are now co-leading the team. This is a very hard thing to do. And I'm speaking not just from my experience having worked with many offices, but my own personal experience. It's very hard. I was in my 20s, late 20s, manager, really like friendly with everybody in the office, but I couldn't remain that friendly with everybody in the office because I had to have boundaries. One thing that comes up a lot in these classes is the concept of complaining and venting and, let's be honest, gossiping. So maybe in the past, kind of joked around about people. Maybe you gossiped a little bit about people, right? Maybe you just had one person, maybe that you and your work bestie, when the other person came in from lunch, you kind of just went, oh, I don't know what kind of mood she's going to be in, that kind of thing. This is normal work stuff, right? You now are not doing that. You shouldn't be doing that. This is not how you move a team forward. I mean, there's an argument to be made that when you were a receptionist or an insurance coordinator, you shouldn't have been doing that anyways. But, we got to have a little bit of fun. But as a manager, you do have to hold yourself higher. But let's take it a little bit. So just the gossiping, the kind of, hey, that person, that don't bother them before 9 o'clock, they're just weird. That's not what I'm talking about. Let's really focus in on the complaining and the commiserating. All right. So there's venting. And many times our job as a manager is to listen, very much to listen, which is kind of hard when you're the one usually like telling people what to do and creating systems and putting things in place. But the real big talent as a manager is to listen and understand, are they coming from a place of constructive venting, constructive conversation, or are they bending your ear because they know that you're going to listen to them? Does that make sense? So let's take an example. I worked with a girl, let's call her Linda. So I worked with a girl, always just complained. Everything was just off. Like she was an assistant, the hygienist, never bagged instruments the right way. She never got to the ultrasonic fast enough. There was just always something, right? So she would come to my office. In the past, she would complain about stuff, and I would say, oh, did she not get the instruments in time? Let her just wait, just let her do them. And then I would walk away because let's be honest, it really wasn't my issue at the point. And I knew that they would somehow make it work. So Linda's coming up to me and she's like, she's still doing it. And this is really a problem. And I'm just blah, blah, blah. And I'm just upset. And I can't believe she's like that. Your job as a manager now is listen. Is this because she's complaining to you and she wants you to fix it? Or is she just venting? Now, this is a fine line. So if she's complaining to you because she wants you to fix it, there has to be an ask. Okay. So here's what I mean. If they're just coming to you and they need to say is, what can you do about it? Is there anything we can do about it? That's the ask. But if they're coming to you and just complaining, you're going to need to step back and say, is there anything that you would like me to do about this? It sounds easy to say. Try it the first time. It doesn't roll off too easily, right? Especially if you're a new manager, you're not 1000% confident in your role. I've been there. Now, if you ask that question and Linda looks at you and just says, I'm just complaining, she's never going to do anything. Nobody's going to do anything. She does the same thing all the time. You have to realize at this point that she's not just complaining and venting. This can develop. So what I heard there is a little bit of resentment and the fact that she's frustrated. This isn't going to change any. Is she expecting you to help? Maybe not. But do you as a manager need to explore that a little bit more? I think you do. These are all the fine lines I'm talking about. It really is up to you to establish that boundary of, you're coming to me to complain. I wouldn't even say complain, actually. You're coming to me with an issue. How would you want me to handle that issue? And that's what I would say. How would you like me to handle this issue? And if Linda says, you know what, don't worry about it, she's not ready to have that conversation. So let her go, but I wouldn't let that be the end of it. I would follow up with that maybe a day later and just say, hey, any more thoughts on that situation that we started to talk about? But if Linda looks at you and says, yeah, I wish someone would do something, that's when you shut the door, have a conversation, but it has to be focused on what is the person doing that's affecting the practice. It's not about how she's making me mad. It's not about how she's upsetting everybody in the office. What is that person doing that's impacting the practice and impacting patient care? As a manager, that is your number one reason for keeping the peace, making sure systems work, making sure the practice stays open. Your duty is to provide good patient care, right? Your other underlying duty is to make sure you stay profitable, but that's a whole different podcast. But here's the issue. If Linda doesn't have any real thoughts on that, she's complaining, and the more you let her complain, the more that just starts to rise, right? And you start to be seen as a complainer in arms. Do you know what I mean? Like, basically somebody's going to walk by and hear that she's complaining to you all over again. It's going to sound like, well, Linda always goes in there. Why does Linda get to go in and say her piece? How come I can't go in and say that? If I said that to Teresa, then I would be called out for it. I would be asked, what do you want to do about it? So by allowing the complaining and the venting to continue without a resolution, you actually are blurring those boundaries. So are you a manager by listening to her complain without a resolution? No, you're a colleague. So that's the difference. Part of when you change over to be a manager is you do have to ask yourself in many situations, am I a manager? Am I a colleague? And this is the example I give out in my class all the time. So if you've heard this before, just bear with me. Okay, I'm a new manager. All right, I just got the promotion, all that. Maybe it's been a month. Okay, so I'm settling in. My former front office bestie, I used to sit next to her all the time, comes up to me and says, hey, I've got some news. I'm going to go ahead and take a job that's closer to my house, the daycare, all this stuff. I have to do this. And, but here's the issue. I don't want the doctor to get mad at me. So could you not say anything to her? All right. So let's stop for a second. There's two first thoughts depending on the path that you go down. If I'm a colleague, if I am a coworker, all right, in my mind, I'm thinking, this stinks. I'm going to lose her. I love working with her. And then I'm going to say to her, okay, well, as soon as you find something out, let me know. But yeah, I won't say anything. I don't want anybody to know either, but you've got to tell me. The manager path that you could take is, I really wish that you hadn't told me, and I don't want you to leave, but I understand. Maybe there's something that we can do to salvage this, but wish you hadn't told me, because now that I do know, I have to do what's right for the office. I actually do have to let the doctor know. But what I can do is make sure that it doesn't come back at you. I just know she's going to want you to stay. So, but you have to understand from my point of view that I can't sit on this because I have to start the wheels in motion now to get somebody hired to fill your position. Okay. So two different paths, the same situation. That person is staring at you like, oh, okay, wait, what? So I'm hoping that you took the manager point of view, that you can't sit on it, that you have a duty to the office. Yes, this might be your work bestie, but you know what? Now you're in a terrible situation. How would your employer feel if they found out that you knew and didn't say anything? There's that erosion of trust between yourself and the doctor. And maybe it's a topic for another podcast, but that relationship between the doctor and the manager has to be the strongest relationship in the office, because for them to let go a little bit and trust you with the business of the office, there has to be trust. So that is one of the quickest ways to erode that trust, is by holding something back, because then your owner doctor is going to not think that you're up to the job. So let me just soothe a little bit, because if you did take the other path, and you did initially say, okay, I'll save the secret. I'll make sure. I want to help her get her job, but hopefully she gives me 3-4 weeks. She gives me plenty of time. I completely understand if you went down that path, because as a good colleague, as a friend, that is the path that you go down. But remember that you signed up to be a manager, and that's different. Now you are thinking business first, friendship close second, but it's business first. And that is really hard. So that's really the barometer. When I ask a new manager, given this scenario, what would you have done? And I can see it in the audience. The veteran managers like myself who've been doing this a long time, they all know this situation, because we have been in this situation. We have felt the pull of friendship versus duty. And it's not easy. It's really not easy. So I'm going to urge you that, yes, you can be a sounding board for your employees, and you can certainly help get them to a point where you're solving problems for them and solving problems with them. But you cannot be the one that listens to all of their grievances all the time. There will be some sort of appearance of favoritism if that's the case, because as you know, there's people in your office that are silent sufferers, right? I worked with many of those. They don't say very much. They get upset, but when they're upset, when they reach that point, they're gone. Well, not everybody's like that, And if you've worked with, outgoing people like myself, like most receptionists, then we tend to tell you when something's bothering us, right? Not everybody is that way. And you, as the manager, you have to account for all of the different personality types in your office. And you have to train your management skills against all of these different personalities. So, in that exercise, in doing that, learning everybody's personalities, you will, as a manager, now start to develop your own communication style. Now, your communication style as a coworker is very different than your communication style as a manager. Your communication style, I'm hoping, is going to include actively listening, asking probing questions, not accusatory questions. But here's the other piece: asking questions often. And that doesn't mean like pulling them aside in the hallway and saying, "Hey, what's going on?" I'm talking about check-ins, everything going okay? You're heating up your coffee in the back room, somebody's taking a break, and everything going okay. Little check-ins, which also means you're going to have to keep track of the people that you don't normally run into and make sure that you check in with them as well. So one issue I ran into a lot was my clinical workers were very, very busy. It was very easy for me to check in with admin assistant in particular. She just was a machine. She was always busy. So any conversations we had were always in passing, and they were always quick because that was her style. So I knew, like, when I saw her, I had to get information from her immediately, right? Like, so I learned her personality and I had to adapt to that. But it was always a thought in the back of my mind: have I checked in with her lately? Have I checked in with her lately? Meanwhile, the two up front, I was always checking in with, because things just happened all day, and geography, right? They were right there. So very, very different there. Leading by example is another part of being a manager that seems intuitive. And, when you become a leader, when you become a manager, part of the appeal is that you get to set an example. You're like, okay, I have been recognized for doing a good job. They recognize that I know what I'm doing. I can't wait to show everybody else that I can really turn this place around, or I can continue to improve it. There's this excitement. There's this, I can't wait to dig in and make this place mine. Okay, that's good. But remember, everybody is watching. So whenever somebody gets a promotion, corporate, private, DSO, whatever, everybody is watching. So lead by example. And I think the best way to foster trust is to admit if you got something wrong. And that is a problem that I see many managers have. And I'm not saying it's arrogance. That's not it. Sometimes it's pride, for sure, because you probably went, say you graduated from being an insurance coordinator and now you've been given the manager position, right? As an insurance coordinator, you nailed everything, right? You were getting plans right. You were doing appeals, getting claims paid. Now you're in a different environment and not everything is coming as easy. That's okay. It's actually to be expected. You would be like a superwoman, superman, if you were able to nail every job 1000%, right? So if you do make a mistake, don't try to sweep it under the rug. You're very visible now. People check up on you. People see what you're doing. Now is not the time to start covering, right? If you mess up, say you misjudge a situation, say you make a bad call with a patient in front of everybody and the patient blows back on you, they're just angry, right? Own that, because the buck does truly stop with you. So remember when patients would get mad at us and we would say, okay, well, you know what? I'll go get the doctor. Guess what? You are now that block in front of the doctor. And I think most doctors would say they're not supposed to get to me, right? That's the beauty of it. Like, that's why you're hired. So if it doesn't go well and you mishandle a situation, I think that's okay. Hopefully it's not too horrible, but this too shall pass. Okay, I'm going to say that again. This too shall pass. You have permission from me to really, like, royally screw up once or twice in your early career. Now, if you royally screw up late in the career, depending on what it is, we got to talk. But come on, you're going to mess up. You're absolutely going to mess up. I'll share my big mistake that I made, and there's a statute of limitations has passed, so I think I'm okay. This is before we had like Sesame and Solution Reach and, Opera DDS and all that. Before that, we didn't have messaging, emails. When we sent an email to a patient, like a mass email, we would have to copy email addresses and put them in the BCC, right? So I was making an announcement about office hours or something like that. And I had copied something like 200 emails, 200 email addresses to send out. And of course, I did the dumb thing and I put them in the CC, not the BCC email address field. Okay, so I still remember like thinking to myself, Why did you not go home at a godly hour? Why are we here at 10 o'clock at night writing emails, trying to get this out? It may not have been 10 o'clock, but it was late. It was dark out. And I sent the email. I didn't even realize I did it wrong. Okay. So go on, getting ready to log out and everything. I finish up. I start getting emails back. My email is pinging, and I'm going, what is going on here? And, to be fair, it wasn't all, a couple hundred. I got emails from about 6 people. And I'm in the Northern Virginia area. Federal employees are everywhere. So here comes a government worker who works for either Health and Human Services, or it was actually Office of Civil Rights. And that would be, the whole HIPAA thing. And he said, just a reminder to check out the companies who support the show. My friends at Synergy Dental Partners are offering 2 free months to try out their lower prices for labs, supplies, and select software services. To sign up, visit odysseymgmt.com/synergy, and the link is also in the show notes. And he said, I really don't appreciate you giving out my email address to your whole patient database. And then another one came in, same thing. I thought, oh my goodness, I am fired 5,000% for sure on this. And I remember it was night because you know why? Because I walked out to my car and I was crying. I remember I was crying. So I thought for sure this was the end of the world, and I apologized. And here's what I did, because this is how not smart I am at that time, right? I mean, maybe I haven't gotten smarter. I don't know. So this is what I did. I actually apologized to that person, and then I sent an email. I sent that same email. I hit reply and apologized to everyone on the email list. Well, you can imagine it went again to everybody. So everybody who didn't open it the first time now opens it again. And I don't know how many people ended up on an email list because of my stupid mistake. What's really funny is that I ended up with more emails before I sent the second email. So after the initial email is when I got the most amount of emails. The second email went out, and I thought for sure that's when people were going to call, going to get upset or whatever. And I didn't get that. So I don't know if you can hear my dog. My dog is chilling out over here on the new bed trying to nest, and it's like, it's not working. So I hope that you can't hear that. But if you do, it's Inca having a good time. So back to this. I think what happened, and one of the patients came in and he had been on the list and he was laughing about it. And he shared a similar, how he had royally, screwed up at his job. And he said, I didn't even get the second email. And I said, really? And he said, it probably went to spam. He said, you probably had too many people on the email list. And maybe a lot of people didn't even get it initially because it went to spam. And I thought, yes, that's what happened. It went to spam. And so I hope that's what happened. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But let's be honest. In today's day and age, HIPAA fines are huge. If I had seen an office do that, I would have been nervous, very nervous. I mean, this is like 20 years ago, right? I was terrified that my boss was going to find out and I was going to get fired. Well, I couldn't not tell him because it weighed on me. So I told him. So why I'm sharing all of this with you is that that's a pretty big screw up. Personal health information, that's a pretty big screw up. And so actually, if you think about it, it's not that I did a bad thing as far as protocol. I actually betrayed the trust of a couple hundred patients. That is what bothers me the most today, right? So I still don't know how many people thought, okay, wow, she's a real idiot, or just never came back. And that has always bothered me. So if you make a mistake, it's not good to cover it. It's never good to cover it. It's good to own it. And that is how you build credibility with your team. And was my employer very angry? You bet. Very much so. You bet. And of course, I remember going home and thinking something similar to, this too shall pass. And it did. I still remember it now. I upset myself, but does anybody else remember it? Probably not. So my point is, give yourself some grace. You are going to mess up as a manager. It's just, it's just going to happen. And don't let these seasoned managers tell you they don't mess up either. We mess up. It's just different now, right? Now, when a seasoned manager has a problem or does something wrong, we tend to feel a lot more guilty about it because we should have known. And then we have a whole bunch of other stuff that goes in, but there's not the fear of when you're a new manager and you mess up. When you're a senior manager and you mess up, you're like, what is going on with me? Like, why would I have done that? And you start to have a lot of self-doubt and you start to do all that. So it's too early in your career, new manager, to go through something like that. So I don't want you to focus on the negative, but I do want you to make sure that you as a manager are going to continue seeking out management skills. Now, this is my last piece of advice to you, and this is something that we talk about in the class. Your skill set is different than the teams. You're going to have the same base knowledge. Okay. So you're going to understand insurance. You're going to understand dental procedures. You're going to understand patient communications, how to handle upset people, all of that. But your skill set as a manager is going to go in a slightly different direction. And I hope your doctor actually goes in this direction with you, because I think it's really good for the manager and the owner to grow together in this way. You're going to start teaching yourself how to think strategically, how to evaluate issues and factors that are going to affect the practice. You're going to start thinking in terms of SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I would love for you to Google SWOT matrix. It's all over Canva. You can find a ton of them. But basically, what it is you have to evaluate different situations and decide what are the pros and cons, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and how are you then going to tackle that problem. Management is its own industry. That's why you can get a degree in it. You can get an advanced degree in it. Management is not only setting up systems, but ensuring that they're running correctly. And the hardest part of management is managing the people. Okay. So my best recommendation to you is to take a conflict resolution class, interpersonal communication skills class. I don't care if you're a super communicator. I don't care if you can talk to anybody on the streets. You can be in a checkout line and talk to people. I don't care about that. I need you to take an actual class that will teach you the basics of conflict resolution. When you learn how to handle conflicts from different people and different personalities, you will become a better manager. I think that and a strategic thinking class that I took a little bit later in my career, probably the best things I could have done as a manager and growing into that role. And then, of course, continuing to take classes. Most of you, if you're listening to a podcast about this, for crying out loud, you are an education person. You love to learn, you love to better yourself, and your way of bettering yourself is going to be slightly different, right? Now, maybe you have an employee that is coming along with you on that path and is really loving this strategic thinking and processes and procedures thing. You're going to groom that person. You're going to become a mentor to that person. But right now I'm concerned with you and having you grow into this new role that you have as a manager. It is not an easy job. There are going to be times when you're going to feel like the whole team is against you. And sometimes having the right direction and wanting to do the right thing isn't popular. Okay. There are going to be many times when your team is not going to be happy with you for having them go through a certain training or having them revisit a situation or putting them in some sort of conflict resolution exercise. You will be disliked at some point in your managerial career. And quite frankly, probably at different times. Now, if you're disliked every day, that's a different conversation, maybe different podcast, right? But if you are doing the job right, not everybody's going to be thrilled, right? Even the best team has some nuances and some drama. It's just normal, right? If you do walk around the corner and people stop talking and they go quiet, you can't take that personally. You can't. If it's mean girl stuff and it continues over and over again, okay, that's a problem. But if they're doing it because you're the boss and they don't want you to hear something, guess what? That's their right. They're the employee. You are the manager. Levels, boundaries, communication styles, all of it has to shift and change. And remember, the biggest thing that has to shift and change, not just your appearance, not just your workplace, but your mindset has to change. Yes, you're the manager now, which means you're responsible for a lot more stuff, right? Hopefully the money got bigger. Okay, that's good. But you're also responsible for a lot of stuff, which means you're going to take hits for things that you didn't necessarily do, but because you were in charge, it was your issue and it was your responsibility. That's management. If it's not for you, there's no judgment. If it's not for you, then realize that now, because it's not easy to go through a whole day where no one in the office wants to talk to you because of some bad meeting that went down. I've had days like that. I've had multiple days like that. And did it hurt? Oh, yeah, for sure. My poor husband has heard me complain and cry and all sorts of stuff about team meetings and staff and offices that I worked with that were just not good times. But Is it rewarding? Sure. Do you see yourself grow? Absolutely. Do you see yourself becoming a better person, a better handler of people, and a better, handler of patients? For sure. So you have to decide what works for you. If you don't want that extra accountability, if you don't feel comfort with being at that different level, there is no judgment. I'd rather you realize that now. But if you are ready to do that, and this is your jam, you are ready to put on that manager coat and feel it, then do it, right? Own it. But remember, it's your office. Everything stops with you, right? So be respectful, be kind to the people that you work with, and remember to take care of yourself because it is a very hard job. Dentistry is hard, the industry is hard, and the patients are weirder than ever. So take care of yourself. And I want to thank you, as always, for listening to this podcast and spending your time with me. I'll talk to you next time.
We're all super busy, so thank you for making time for me today. The show notes will have any links that we referenced in the episode. You can also find links for my book, events, and my online insurance course, Dental Insurance Design and Management. I speak often around the country on management and insurance issues. Come hang out with me in one of my classes. I promise you'll laugh and learn.